Excellent. Welcome to our Facilitation Skills webinar as part of the UMB Online Learning Series. I'm here today accompanied by Sorina Nita and Federica Milano, two of our senior trainers, which will lead us through some of the theory and the methodology of good facilitation and giving us some tools on how to be effective as facilitators. And with that, I will ask my two resource people to introduce themselves and then start.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Federica Milano. I work as a trainer and facilitator, and I have the pleasure to be here with you today. We will go through, as Marzia already said, some tips and some ideas regarding what facilitation is and also how to make it effective. So how to actually implement the skills that we might already possess or we might want to develop. Sorina, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, I think it's good to invite each other. It's a bit challenging to know when to speak. So I'm Sorina Nita. I'm based in Romania. And I've been also working as a facilitator and as a trainer in the last, I think, more than 10 years with quite diverse groups and quite different objectives in facilitation. And I hope I will manage all the technological challenges of this webinar, and I really hope it will be useful for all of you. It's very nice to see some people that have been participants in the assignment preparation trainings that I've led as a trainer, so good to see you all. And Federica, you can take it from here.
Hey, if you are ready, we could start because we have 1 hour. So 1 hour, as you know, is a very little time just to have a glimpse of what the facilitation's word is, but it's a pleasure to go discovering a bit together some parts of it. So let's start. The verb to facilitate already tells us much about what facilitation is. And the main goal of facilitation is to being able to make as easier as possible a process to assist and support a group of people in reaching a common goal. The goal can be extremely different. We can use facilitation in decision making. We can use it just to improve the group dynamics. We can use it in supporting the change for decision maker. Also, we can use it to have different and more shared changes and in process of change. We can have a better ownership because through the participatory approach, everybody feels somehow responsible and part of the change that is planned and implemented. So we use facilitation as a process to facilitate the relationship and the exchange between people in order for them to reach the goal that they have. For sure, you have had many situations in which different people had to gather together, take decision, or wanted to explore a topic together, or have some learning objectives. And the facilitation allows us to make of the number of people present a whole, and by that doing, having a process that is more enriching for each individual and also as a group. So who's the facilitator? The facilitator is that person that is responsible of designing and planning the activities that will take place in order to foster the exchange between the members of the group. Facilitation requires to be extremely planned and structured in order to allow actually all the participants to express their opinion, to feel safe enough to do so, as well as being able to go through the different moments of discussion and reach the goal that they have. So because many times when we sit in a room with a group, we don't exactly know what are the needs, or we might know some, but we might not be aware of all of them. The role of the facilitator is also the one of being able to read the group that is standing in front of him or her and adjust the procedure that had been planned in order to meet the needs that this specific group has. The needs that a group has are very different. They are sometimes individual. They might depend on personal preferences. They have sometimes cultural roots, as well as they might depend on how the group relates and the group members relate to one another. Is that till now clear? Is there anything that you might want to go deeper in?
Colleagues, do you have any specific questions, or would you like to maybe also have your own definition of facilitation and what it means to you in your daily life or in your work experience? Use the chat to contribute.
Sadly, the webinar doesn't allow us to have as an interactive relationship as we would like to have as facilitators. So please be free to use the chat in any moment to express your opinion or give us feedbacks. We will try to include them all in the presentation and discuss them all together. Need a bit of explanation. Great. Okay. As we were saying, when we gather a group of people, we generally have an objective. It can be a meeting, a work meeting, can be a workshop. So you are actually having some learning objectives that you have set. But the idea is that you have different individuals gathering in a place to reach a goal. And if you would leave these individuals with no set activities, with not a planned procedure to go through, it could be an extremely rich experience, but might be not that effective. And the facilitation so allows us to make this possible. And we can facilitate whatever meeting in which a group of people is involved. And we can also do so on topics that we are not so familiar with. This is where the distinction between trainer and facilitator comes in. The facilitator focuses on the process. So the facilitation is about how we move from one moment to another of the meeting, and how we move from the discussion to summarizing, to having an agenda, to building agreements or generating ideas. And it focuses very much on the process. So the facilitator himself or herself is little responsible regarding the content of the meeting. Meanwhile, when we speak about trainers, we speak about professionals that have a similar role in the activities, but they also have a responsibility over the content. So they do want to, they take responsibility over some concept they want to be transmitted to the group that is taking part in the event. There is a nice comment regarding from Dinda regarding the fact that sometimes we are called to facilitate in a situation in which the flow on how to, like the procedure on how to lead the participant through the event are already set. This can happen because sometimes when we go, we step in as facilitator, we step in events that have been planned and organized by other people. In this case, what we can do is use their experience. And this is the reason why many times we receive a sort of set of activities that that have been planned already. And they are being selected by the organizer generally on the basis of their own experience, which is a richness. It doesn't have to be a limit to facilitation because the facilitation is the process itself. But it's actually a good source of information as well as a good source of experience, because they have a better and clearer idea about the profile of participants, about what kind of activities might work better with this kind of participants, as well as they know in a clearer way what are the learning objectives and how they want to reach them. Absolutely, there is another comment very interesting regarding the creation of a safe space. This is also part, and we will see it later, of what a facilitation is. And it's fundamental that when we work with a group, we take in account the whole group and we never relate mainly just to individuals. Thank you very much for participating so actively. This is beautiful. Okay, let's try to move on and see what kind of different modes we have of facilitation. As you can see, this is a nice model that you can also find online, and that can give you an idea of the different modes and different approaches that we have with the facilitation itself, depending on what we want to reach. Because whatever modes we choose and whatever technique and methods we do apply, we have different results. In some of them, the trainer or the facilitator might be having a very active role, and might be informing participants, might be sharing tools, might be also sharing some context. So it's basically telling the participants some information. In this mode, we have a high contribution to the content of the facilitators. At the same time, we have a low interaction though of the participants. This, at the same time, allows us to reach an objective in a shorter time, for example. As you can see on the left side of the graph, there is the interaction between participants and facilitator. Meanwhile, you have on the other axis, you have the different elements that might change depending on the tools that we decide. So we have how much is the facilitator contributing, or how much are the participants contributing with their own knowledge in the process, or how much do the participants interact. And depending on which modes we choose, we have very different outcomes. When we move on to look at proposing, so when we are just proposing an idea, receiving a feedback from the participants, and then integrating the feedback and moving on with the procedure, in that case, we have a much higher interaction between the facilitator and the participants, which values also their experience and their knowledge in a greater way, giving them much more ownership regarding the result and the outcomes that we will obtain. But sure, this requires for us a bigger amount of time. We need more time because this process will need structured moments of sharing and summarizing, and also the time to have a consensus by the whole group on the outcome obtained and achieved. Then we have another way, that is what happens generally when some inputs or some experience has been shared and the participant jump in the process with both feet. And then is when the facilitator then steps back. We are moderating in that case, which means we try to make sure the whole group and all different members of the group are participating equally in the process. Which, let's be clear, maybe it doesn't mean that a person has to speak as much as another, because there are many ways of participating and being active in a process. So we might want to be able also to recognize different kind of participation, but we moderate this change between the different participants in order for them to hear out all the different voices and all the different experience that the group has. Then we might find ourselves in the situation in which we really want the participants to take a step forward towards the creation of their own outcome. So we want to stimulate a reflection, and we want to stimulate a process that requires participants to not only share and their experience and knowledge and tools and competencies, but also put them to practice. So use them in order to solve the problem that they are facing or reach the goal that we have in the meeting or in the event. In this case, the stimulation is an extremely important role of the facilitator. The facilitator has to have the ability, and it's something that you can just practice by always wonder when you are in a room with a group of people and an event that you're facilitating, should I step back or should I just push it a little, or should I just allow participants in this moment to share their idea? And stimulating is this ability to be a spark, to ask the right question. It's not much about giving the right answers. It's much more about asking the right question, so that the conversation might start and all the different people might engage, and by so doing, enriching the process itself and reaching the goal that we have. A last thing that a facilitator can do and a trainer can do is, and is what happens generally at the end of the process, is to empower the different group members and participants. We empower them by actually supporting them in realizing and assess their own competencies, for example, or evaluating the process that they went through and what kind of competencies were used in order to reach the goal. It's a very important moment because, as we know, facilitation is a moment that happens in an event, but many of the competencies that we might develop or the agreements that we might reach then have to live beyond the meeting itself. So the facilitator has the role also of being sure that the different PCT itself.
Federica, you broke up a little bit.
Good.
Could you repeat this last sentence, let's say?
Yes, I'm sorry. I hope my connection will not create problems. I was saying that when we are empowering the participants that we have in our group, is a matter of the fact that the competencies, experience that they shared, as well as the agreements that they reached, must live beyond the event itself. They have a life after the workshop or the meeting. In this moment, it's fundamental that they feel capable and aware and also committed to what happened and what will happen. And we do so by empowering them and making each participant be aware of his own competencies, his own strength, and his own commitments, which is a very important process that closes the moment of the event, but also makes a transition then back in the real world. There are a couple of questions that I see in the chat. One says, can we say moderation is good when participants are expert and participants who are willing and ready to share, contribute, or active? Absolutely. We cannot moderate a situation in which participants don't feel confident or comfortable enough to talk, so to share their own knowledge and competencies, as well as it's hard to moderate when there is not an engaged group. So we need to have the group already engaged in the process in order to moderate the exchange between the different participants. And it's also a responsibility of the facilitator to ensure that all this kind of atmosphere is created and the participant can go through the process in the most welcoming and respectful way possible. I also very much agree with what John is writing right now regarding this point, which is the facilitator is responsible for the process, but the experts are actually the participants. This is exactly what we were saying. So we might even facilitate a meeting or an event whose content is not something that we are comfortable or confident with or familiar. This is possible because the focus of the facilitator is on the process. Meanwhile, the focus, the knowledge and the competencies and the experience come from the participants. We also have some regarding some difficult participants. We have all part of the presentation regarding it. So how to manage group dynamics and specific participants in case you might encounter more challenging, but still probably very engaged participants. Okay, if you think that this is clear, we might try to move on. Give just as a sign. Okay, Felipe is with us. Okay, great. Some okay are coming in. Great. So let's try to go a bit more in detail what this all means. There are three main areas in which we apply all the different techniques and methods and even activities, and are the one that you find on the left under the facilitation goals. The facilitator is responsible to spark interest, so engage the group, being able to create an environment in which people are curious and also feel comfortable enough to participate. And then we have to sustain the process. Sustain the process means that meanwhile all this change between the different participants is taking place, we are able to structure it in a way that we are avoiding obstacles, we are enriching the process as much as possible, we are being sure that all the group is participating equally, and by that doing we have the highest level of sharing, which is one of the richest part of the process. As facilitators and trainers, the idea that we have always at the bottom is that the participants have already in themselves a lot of knowledge, experience, and competence that we just need to harvest and make the participant share with the rest of the group, because the group is a source of learning itself, much more than the facilitator or the trainer. And then we have to deepen. Deepen happens in the moment in which we are reflecting or guiding moments of reflection over the previous parts and the different activities and methods that have been applied, and we try to support the different people in doing just a step more. So try to deepen their understanding, try to challenge their own ideas, try to challenge their own position if it's a decision-making process, to see a bit further. Try to include the different voices that have been heard during the process, and to have a deeper understanding of the process itself, as well as of the goal, its meaning, and how to reach it. We do that by really simple things sometimes. It's not needed incredible things. Other times it requires a lot of planning and preparation. The most important thing is that you must have, as a facilitator, to be familiar and dedicate time to study and learn different techniques, why some of them are applied in some moments and not others, as well as you might want to feel familiar with how to plan an agenda. So how to be sure that the time is calculated right, for example, and the different elements that you need in the process are all included. There is some still exchange regarding the content. Thank you very much, John, to also reply to it. Okay, so if we want to spark initial interest, the most important thing is that people will not feel welcomed if we don't make them feel welcome first. When we enter in a room with many different people that we don't know, or we might know little, or we might have some divergent opinion regarding the topic that we will discuss, we need to make everybody feel comfortable. And this is something that the facilitator is responsible for. It's about make people smile at people when they enter, introduce yourself kindly, always offer to offer help if you can, try to meet the needs or to see the needs of the different people the people entering, and always be positive in the interaction. A facilitator that doesn't look anybody in the eyes is not a good facilitator. Eyes contact is one of the first and most important thing, as well as it is to speak in the most calm and nice way. Try to be always aware that your role there is to make of a room a home for the time of the event. When we move to sustain the process, we will go to a part of the interaction between the different participants that is very challenging for them, or can be very challenging, because the facilitation process implies a process of trial, which means that mistakes will be done. And this is something that might be frustrating for the participants, or might be somehow lowering the mood and the energy of the group. And it's very important always to give and recognize the value of all the ideas the participants bring, and always recognize the mistake as a part of the process. Mistakes are a part of the process. If you don't make mistakes, it's because you're not trying to do anything. So the most important thing is to recognize behind the mistake actually the will to try to do something new. And because it's new and we might not be so familiar with, we do make mistakes. And this is fine. And the best way to welcome them is actually to have a laugh regarding it, or bringing it back to the group and have it as a shared moment. Mistakes are very often also the sparks of very innovative ideas. So let's also always keep them in account. And be also aware that mistakes bring a very tricky situation on the emotional level. People get frustrated. They think, oh gosh, I'm not going to speak again, or this is not going to work, and I'm just not able. Support participants in those moments by making them feel as supported as possible, by being there, by even talking to them outside the activity if it's needed, and always valuing, giving really a huge value and gratitude for their commitment to the process. and be always positive. Just tell them that this is fine. Tell them the mistakes are good. Then being frustrated is good, because when we are frustrated, then we look for a different option. So we look for option that before we would never take in account. We think out of the box, and this enriches everybody's process. Last, when we go deepening, that can be challenged because sometimes we are not, as human beings, we are not really aware of some aspect that live in ourselves, or some ideas that we have, or some prejudices that we have. And these are the obstacles that don't allow us to go a bit further. So it can be sometimes tough on the participant to be challenged to go beyond their own limits, beyond their own ideas, beyond their own understanding. This happens and is possible thanks to good questions. Good questions are the keys. And the ability also of rephrase whatever might come as complex points, always rephrase them in a positive way, so to allow people to see that going beyond doesn't really mean to expose themselves too much, but also that when they do expose, this allowed themselves and the group to grow. And this is the reason why we are all together. Help them to generalize generalize the knowledge or competence that they have been acquired, or the idea they have generated, or the decision and agreements they have reached. Help them to generalize them, to being able to connect them to situations that they live in their daily life. Help them to connect them to their real life, because there is the richness. It's like from something that lives in a room, there is an event, there might be a decision-making process, there might be a learning workshop. The ability, we need the participant to have the ability to generalize those competencies and knowledge and debates in order to apply them on a greater scale. There is the scale of the real life. So don't be afraid to challenge participants. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but always keeping in mind what is the point of the question. The point of the question is always to go further in the process, to make people confident enough to take a step more. On the right, there are many different little techniques. We don't really have the time to go through them all, but we will share with you the presentation and also other materials if you would like us to. So you can go through them, or maybe you have been reading them already meanwhile I was talking. This is a bit the general view of facilitation that we wanted to give you, and now we would like to kind of dive in more in how we can do that, in how in the moment that we are in a workshop, how can we do all those things, and try to see some tips that might be useful for you in your daily work. Could you please just confirm me if you're ready to move on, and if everything is fine, if any question is still there regarding this part? It's fine. Okay, Sorina, then I will let you have fun for the next part. You ready?
Ready. So what do we do with all these things that we know? How do we prepare for an activity that we need to facilitate? And also, what do we keep an eye on when we facilitate? And we chose 4 factors that impact in a very big deal the process. And and my presentation is not moving. No, it's moving. So the first one that Federica already mentioned several times is to have always in mind what is the objective of the activity, of the meeting, of the workshop. If we talk about facilitation in the context of a training, then we for sure have learning objectives of our activities. And with this, I would like to answer also, there was a question, there was no name attached to the question, but somebody was asking, can trainers also facilitate? And my answer would be yes, because especially in the latest or more contemporary, more used models of training, it's not only the trainer that is the expert. So you do come with expertise, you do come with content, you do come with knowledge, but your role as a trainer is also to bring out the knowledge of the group and the collective wisdom, let's say. And a lot of times, you just facilitate the exchange of knowledge or the transfer of knowledge from between peers, or you even facilitate self-directed learning processes. So yes, you do facilitate as well as a trainer. And then if you don't have learning objectives, you could also, you need always to keep in mind why are we here? Why are we here in this room or in this setting? What do we want to get done by the end of the activity? Because it's very fascinating to become lost in a group process. And I know both me and Federica, we put a lot of focus and emphasis on the process and making it fruitful and making it worthwhile for the participant. And sometimes it's easy to get drifted apart by interesting ideas that come up, by interesting dynamics that bring out a new dimension. And then it's always like a dance, like an equilibrium that you have to keep always between integrating these new dynamics that pop up and making sure you reach the objective of your meeting. And I'll just go through all of them, and then we see if there are questions or insights from your side. The second one, which has also been mentioned, I think even from the beginning, is who are you facilitating for? Who do you have in front of you? And when we talk about your group of participants, there are many, many, many dimensions to keep in mind, from the size of the group, which is common sense, and sometimes yet we don't take it into consideration so much, to the structure, to characteristics of the group, even previous interactions between the group. It's important to know if there is history or dynamic, because you might realize, for instance, you are trying to facilitate or to moderate a discussion when people show their points of view and have a critical eye on situations. But if you have, for example, people with their bosses in the same room, it's possible that this dynamic might interfere with your activity, so it's good to be aware of it. Then you have personal and common history. You have always people's expectations, which sometimes might not be realistic or might not fit the objectives of the meeting. You might have learning needs that you are or you are not able to meet in this meeting that you are facilitating. You have obviously cultural dynamics, and this is a topic for not one, but maybe 10 webinars more. You have all this group dynamic, or the dynamic between the learning zone, the panic zone, and the comfort zone. So a lot of things to keep in mind, and this is not only in the preparation phase, but this is also while you are facilitating the activity, to keep an eye on all these things and try to see how they interfere with the activity and what you can do in order to optimize the process. Then we have, obviously, I think it's, let's see if it appears. No? Yes. You have everything that is connected with logistics and practicalities. And for some of us, this might be the boring part or the not so glamorous part of facilitation, which involves taking into consideration all the restraints or all the resources that you might need. We might have a wonderful, wonderful method, or we might have a wonderful facilitation style, but there's no time to put it into practice. We need to have materials, equipment at hand and working, and we need to look at human resources, working space, time of day, rhythm, life rhythm of people, and any other things that can interfere with the activities. And then last but not least, we have ourselves. And maybe this is one of the last things we look at, and I would say it's one of the first things to look at, because you facilitate, but by what you do, but you facilitate most by who you are, and this is very visible to participants. And I would encourage us to always take a step back and to have a reflective process regarding how we approach facilitation, and what are the situations in which we are uncomfortable, what are our strengths, what are we good at, and what are we not so comfortable in doing. And especially it happens a lot also that we work in teams as facilitators, so there's a whole dynamic there, and there's a lot of potential, and at the same time there's a lot of synchronization and tuning in that needs to be done. So this is just a structure to put a lot of things together. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any observation that you would like to make, or maybe some experience, personal experience that you would like to share with us? And maybe we can write, or we can also try to unmute and hear some voices. And John is saying, I would like to refer everyone to competencies developed by the International Association of Facilitators. Thank you, John. We have the link there.
Excellent.
So any comments?
Comments, or they want to add anything in terms of things to take into consideration when looking at facilitation and how we approach facilitation? Is there anything else you would like to add? As Sorina said, you can add it in the chat box, or if you want to talk to us, we can also unmute you.
No reaction so far? Unless it's discussed later, can you talk about an example where you had to do a 180 in facilitating an activity? I personally would need an explanation what is in 180. Are you talking about feedback, but let's start 360, so a little bit of clarification, please, Josephine, to your question. Unless
I assume it means that you had to change halfway through completely. Yeah?
Ah, okay.
That's fine.
Thank you, Marcia. My head was in, is this a technique?
Yeah.
Are they testing my knowledge and expertise in delivering this webinar?
No, excellent. Yes, so Josephine confirms when you had to completely change the program due to indicators that you mentioned. Can you give a concrete example of a situation like that you can share with the colleagues? And maybe also others, if you can write their own experiences in the chat box, that's also quite enriching for us.
So what I would say is that so these factors are to be taken into consideration as much as possible also in the preparation phase. But obviously still you have quite a lot of surprises on site. I do not recall having such a huge change, but I know that usually I work in a team, so in every break or whenever people are working, I usually consult with my co-trainer or co-facilitator, looking at, okay, is this going how we planned it? Can we incorporate suggestions from participants? And I've changed in my work. I've changed activities, or I've changed structure or dynamics according to these factors, but I don't think I have an experience to change, to have such a big change. And I think if you have to do such a big change, you should take also a look at your preparation phase as a facilitator, because maybe there is something lacking there.
Yes, maybe what we can say about regarding changing programs during on the run is that that happens if the group of people that you're facing is very different from what you expected, or because some of the activities that you prepared, you feel they are not working. And in this case, it's actually a matter of changing the process, but not the goal. So for example, if you have people that in plenary do not speak much because they are afraid, or they don't feel comfortable, or they are just not so chatty, you may want to have people working in small groups and having the debate happen in small groups and then just report in plenary. You may want to have them write things on flip charts, so have bullet points prepared. So it's a matter of, as Serena was saying, it's more a matter of adapting the process, so adapting the methods that you present the people.
Thank you, Federica. I think also John has some experience. Perhaps while Serena is preparing for the next slide, John, do you want to unmute yourself and talk about briefly about a situation that you've encountered? If you can, that is.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. Greetings, everybody from Goldman DRC. Yeah, I've got. I mean, lots of examples I can think of where it's not so much about changing the actual objective, but more if you see an activity is not working well or a particular process, and then you've got to rethink. And sometimes you've got to really think on your feet, and that's why I'm always emphasizing the importance of having a good range of tools and methods and processes so that you're able to adapt as needed, because you think you've got a perfect plan and it just doesn't go to plan. And that's the point where you've got to realize that you can't just keep trying to force this, but you've got to rethink how you do it. And the point about working in a team is very important as well. It's not something maybe you do on your own, but you consult with whoever you're working with. An extreme example comes to mind in a workshop in Mozambique. I wasn't there myself, but I heard about it in great depth in a debriefing, and they were doing a workshop on social inclusion and looking at people using a lot of storytelling, people sharing their very personal and powerful experiences. By halfway through the first day, they realized actually they need to abandon their program. They need to focus on what's really important for the participants, which was having space and time to share some very deep experiences that they never really shared before. So I think you've got to be brave at times and say, hang on, does the agenda make sense? Does what we've got planned make sense? And, there's no right answers, but sometimes you've got to just try and sense that.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, John. Okay, Serena.
Thank you, John. It's one of the things that we also have included in what we selected as the 9 facilitators' good habits, or this is the section of tips and tricks. And one of them is have a great plan and be prepared to change it. Sometimes we feel the need to be right as facilitators, and we believe so much in our activities. We say, okay, this must work, and then when for some reason at a certain moment, it doesn't even matter why the participants are not so respondent to it. They might not be ready for this dynamic, or they whatever happens, then we stay humble and we say, okay, we are here to facilitate for you. You are the focus, and we do whatever works for you. And this is one of the good habits. But to start with the beginning is I am really having difficulties with the presentation to make it respond. Okay. The first one would be to be proactive and to take responsibility. And it's exactly, you go in there with a plan, but you are at all times with your eyes open and with your ears open, and you take responsibility for what's going on while knowing where you want to get. And to go back to one of the discussions that happened in the chat in the beginning, knowing the outcome doesn't mean manipulating the participants, because what we mean by knowing the outcome is to know why we are here from. So it's, if we facilitate an activity that aims at taking a decision, we need a decision by the end of the activity. It doesn't matter what the decision is. So it's not influencing the decision, it's making sure it is taken. Then again, the importance of preparation and logistics. Don't go unprepared, and have plan A, B, C, D, and so on. Try to find solutions so that everyone have win-win situations as much as possible, and as much as time-consuming and energy-consuming it would be. Make sure you get the objective of the activity met, and also the needs and expectations of the participants met in an ideal situation. For number 5, this is something that we are going to look a little bit more into when we look at how we react to different situations. And it's normal, us as humans, we have this tendency to react, but what we consider a good habit is to resist this urge to react, and first to understand and to listen and to observe. And this has a lot to do also with being aware of your own reactions, and ask questions until you understand and you make sure you know what's going on. Trust the process and trust the group. Sometimes we want to take people by the hand and show them, no, you must be here, you must learn this, you must see this. But as facilitators, if we have methods that work, and if we have a team that works, once we are out there, we just trust the process and the group that it will lead where it needs to go. But it's also our responsibility to build trust. And I think it was said by someone, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of this person in the chat, that facilitating is a lot about building trust and building a climate where people can actually speak out, and where diversity is encouraged, diversity of opinions, and whatever comes in your room, and that we manage to encourage the participation of everyone. Then we already covered this through the answers of the questions, to always pay attention to what's going on and to be flexible, to be ready to move to plan A, B, C, D, and to always be open to learn. And something that I've heard a lot of times as feedback to facilitators is that participants really appreciate it when you're humble, because it's not, in facilitation, it's not about you and showing off, but it's about being there to serve a bigger objective and to serve these people that are in the room with you. And I think with this we are done with the tips and tricks and all this, how to put into action what we know as theory. Are you?
What we would ask you is, because it's just 10 to 4 already, so we ran a bit late because we really much like the time. So what we ask you, because what we have left are for you some real situations, some of which you were actually asking in the chat about. So how to manage different kind of participants, and how to manage a specific situation that might be challenging. So if you want and you would like to, we could share with you this part that is still missing. That will take us, though, at least 15 minutes more than what planned. So we would like to inform you, and sure, if for you is not, you have other commitments, we totally understand. But if you would like to, we could share it with you, or for the ones that can stay with us a bit longer. Please share, okay? Setting ground rules. We are taking all your questions and we are gathering them, and we will reply to them all at the end of the presentation if there is they are not being replied already by the presentation itself. Okay, so thank you guys.
Federica, because so this is adapting on the way, no? It's putting into practice what we've been talking about so far. because we had a person asking several times how to deal with difficult participants. Maybe we skip directly to the participants' profiles that we've prepared, and we finish with that. What do you say?
As you wish. For me, we can also go very fast, maybe through just some, and then we move participant dedicating it more time, because clearly seems more.
Okay, so there's a discussion. We agree with what is being said in the chat on ground rules.
Is one of the that we do in every event if we can, and allows participants to take responsibility over their own behaviors, because the rules are generally set by consensus, which means that the participants have the possibility to express if they disagree with the rule before breaking it. And in the moment that they agreed on the rule, is actually a rule that they put on themselves and they accept in the group.
Okay, so we go with possible situation, and not only possible but probable, and quite common in also in our experience as facilitators. So
okay, let's start. People are constantly late, so you have an agenda, the agenda is packed, you have planned all the activities in detail, but participants come in late. So this is making everything very difficult because your agenda doesn't really allow a lot of flexibility, and because you have already some participants in the rooms, but some are still missing. What do you do? We will move through this fast so that we can have more time dedicated to the profile of participant that many of you were interested in. So our only suggestion is don't wait for them. Don't wait for the latecomers. Don't do so, because this is first of all encouraging the ones that were punctual to come late themselves also. And also because you have a commitment and agreement with the group. And this means literally that you respect the agreement, you stand for it and you stand by it. Though if it happens to you that you have for some reason run late and you need more time than what you foreseen, first of all, try to avoid it. This is not very respectful toward the participants. But if it does happen, like now in our webinar, please inform the participant and ask if they can stay more. Maybe give them some time to inform their families or whoever they want to call, just to say that they would be late to whatever other commitment they have. So always try to stick to the agenda and try to make the commitment of the group stick to the rules that you have agreed upon. If it happens very often that you always run late, so you never have enough time to do your activities, then there might be a problem in your planning. So you might be planning too many things in too little time. So you might want to actually recheck that, and also always be aware that the people need time to share and they need time to discuss, and this is a part that you have to allow and you have to promote. Okay. Then other situation, people are losing focus. So you have been going to activities for 4 hours, at one point with a break, sure, because 4 hours in an hour is too much. But at one point, you see that many of the participants are staring at the ceiling, very likely thinking about what they will have for lunch, or whatever their favorite series is on Netflix. This is a good moment to call back the attention. Don't try to do so by organize the participants. So to call them back by saying, come on, people, it's time, we have to do this and that. This generally is just not getting the thing done. By that saying, it puts the participants in a level saying you're doing something wrong, you should do it differently, but doesn't really encourage them to do so. So you don't really obtain what you're looking for. Much better, if you can and you have the flexibility, try to give a break as soon as possible so that the people can stand up and have a coffee. Try to include this awareness in the next activities ahead. So make people move, literally stand up and maybe discuss standing instead of sitting, and take 5 minutes to do an energizer. And just make people move and have fun so that the energy is reactivated and the process can further go on. Regarding the different methods and activities as well as the energizer, we are not dedicating much time because there is a huge huge bibliography regarding it. So there are many, many books. We can also share in an email to you many. We can share in the chat some of the one that we use the most. So we really suggest you to go looking for some of the publications that can be very supportive, and they have very, like there are many, and they have different methods for different groups. Last cases that we will see together is two participants engage in a conflict. Especially if you are in a situation of decision making, this might happen, where people have very have very different opinions on something. And if you find yourself in a group where there is a conflict going on between one or two participants or more, please be extremely careful when handling the situation, because if you try to solve the conflict by moderate it, you will basically lose a lot of time. So you will lose the process of the whole group to focus only and exclusively on the needs of two members of the group. It's fundamental that you always keep in mind that you are facilitating the whole group and the whole group process. So use the group. This is our suggestion. Use the group as your most supportive tool, because the group is capable of actually solving the issue maybe within itself, or it anyhow is able to counterbalance the dynamic of the conflict. So bring the conflict back to the group, but not as a conflict, but as a moment of discovery. So ask the group, anybody has another opinion regarding the topic. Use the majority, they might be passive in the moment, as the tool to solve the conflict. This is our suggestion, because the group has incredible powers and possibilities and resources. And this might also make of a personal issue a group issue, and from the personal level of emotional engagement, it will always move to another one, which is more connected on the topic itself, on the content, and not so much on the personal dynamic of conflict. Okay. So this is something that you were very interested in. I let you start, Sorina, with the first kind of type of participants.
Okay, I think it's also the one that someone has been talking about quite a few. Probably we've all had these participants in our groups. It's we call it the know-it-all bird. And this participant, it's quite verbal. It's quite dominant. Maybe the first person you don't finish the question and this person already answers. They have a lot of questions, a lot of additional comments, and sometimes they are off topic, but not necessarily. So they are quite focused on what's going on. The only thing is that, well, they are taking the time from the other participants, and then the question is, what do you do? And I'm not sure if we have time to make it into a discussion, or we just go through our tips and tricks. Maybe I keep talking, and then you can write your approach, and then we integrate it in the presentation, just to keep it time-wise still close to the initial 1 hour. So remember, I was talking about our natural instinct to react to things. The way that we organize this section is to put the reactive response, what we feel like doing normally, and then what we consider is a more effective response. So what we would tend to do, and I also do it, I can't help it sometimes, I just try to control this person, and I try to say, well, you're taking in a nice way, but still you're taking a lot of time. Let's hear somebody else, or do you mind giving the turn to someone else? And this might work sometimes if the person manages not to feel offended, and if they are not aware of their behavior. And it could be like a wake-up call, saying, oh, I didn't realize, yes, this is how I am, I usually talk a lot, sorry, thank you for telling me. But you have the risk of people getting quite offended here. So what is a good approach always is not to focus on the dominant minority, but to focus on the passive majority. So if there is one person talking a lot, it means that the other persons are not participating. So one good strategy would be to try to encourage the other to participate more, and also to give this person, the know-it-all bird, to give them the opportunity to ask these questions that they have in another space, or to have something like a parking space, or like a toolbox or suggestion box where you invite them to write or to share several ideas that don't fit in the process. Also asking closed questions, and don't answer directly. So integrate what they are saying, but don't engage in a conversation. We have a question: what about those who distract the session? I think we have some animals that would fit this, so we are getting there. Okay, we move to the next one, and we do 1-1, Federica?
Sure. The next one is the very talkative frog, and he's the kind of participant that speaks a lot, speaks fast, might say many interesting things, but generally doesn't make the point, is very enthusiastic, over-enthusiastic sometimes, and sometimes repetitive. What is our natural reaction to these kind of participants is that we tend to ask this person to take control. So to try to control herself or limit a bit the participation. And this is actually putting the participant in a very difficult position, because when the session will start again, he will still have this wish and will to talk, but at the same time he would be very anxious, she would be very anxious by doing so, disrupting the process. The best way to avoid to make any participant anxious, but to protect the process in order to make it run smooth, is first of all to give a gentle hint to the participant. Maybe the person is not aware. And then to be able to ask close questions, very specific ones. So don't use big questions, always use close ones, don't use open ones. And also be aware, if someone is repetitive, it's generally because the person doesn't feel heard. And one of the most useful tools that a facilitator will always have is the ability to rephrase and paraphrase what is being said by the participants in a way of making it positive if it was expressed in a negative way, but also to make the person feel that the person was heard. So acknowledging what was said by rephrasing it and resharing it to the group. Be always aware that we generally do not engage with difficult behavior. We try always to facilitate the process, so facilitate this behavior inside the group dynamic. Okay, next one. This is the last rush.
First, well, it's funny, no? In first we talk about the slow snail. It's the person that needs a lot of time to understand what's going on, to read the information. Sometimes they don't seem to understand what's going on what they need to do, but other times they just like to take their time. They even talk slowly. They pay a lot of attention to the tasks and so on. Now, in our rush to reach our objectives, we tend to tell them to hurry up, or sometimes even ignore these people. We see them, we see what's going on, but we say, well, as long as the group is working in the expected rhythm, it's fine if we lose one on the way. The downside is that this person might start to feel left out of the process and even zoom out if they can't keep up. So it's good to keep them involved still. Maybe not ask about knowledge, but experiences, something they can connect very fast to. Check their emotions. if possible, give them more time to do tasks. So you can tell them they can still stay in the room to fill in, I don't know what kind of activity chart that you have or whatever, and also create a safe space where they can ask questions either to you or their colleagues when they don't understand or they are left behind. Even assign buddies, so not necessarily only to this person, but you can assign generally buddies to people so they help out each other, and then they can keep up with the group. And yeah, it's a reminder for us all. No, we like diversity, at least in theory. So adapt in order to even include the slowest ones in the group. The next one.
Very similarly to the slow nails, somehow we have the very shy deers. They really dislike to be at the center of attention. They are generally quite introvert or insecure, and you can perceive their discomfort by just sitting in a room filled with people. The fact that those participants might participate less tends us to try to include them in ways that might not be so respectful or so efficient. So what we tend to do is maybe ask them directly, you haven't talked much, would you like to add anything or comment? And this might actually make the participant withdraw even further. This is because if they don't feel comfortable in the center of attention, they will feel even less comfortable in the center of attention if they didn't give you any nonverbal hint that they might want to talk and they are just trying to look for the right moment. And you really want to have them as part of the process. You really want to actually hear out what they want to say and what they can share. So the best way is to help them getting out of their comfort zone in the most secure and supportive way. And you can do that by asking direct questions that are though close or very simple, boost their confidence, talk to them also in breaks. Always try to look for a connection, a human connection with these participants. This is where you can meet them, and from there on, where you can harvest their knowledge and their experience. Also be aware that if you have such participants, they feel much more comfortable in activities in which they relate to less people. So maybe substitute some plenaries with small groups work or even pairs work, so that allows this person or these people to actually express their opinion in a more comfortable situation and environment.
Okay, then we have, there was a question of one of you, what about the participants that are very disruptive and even destructive? We have the sneaky snake, poor snakes, they are always associated with bad things. And these are really the disrespectful participants, the people that make fun, that speak loud opinions, that are not respecting the others, that use negative facial expressions, or even just smile while they offend people. And then what do you do? Not the reaction would be to get caught in the fight, to get offended, to take it personally, and to confront the people. But on the other hand, this is taking a lot of space from the process of the group, and sometimes it's good to allocate this space if it's a learning opportunity for everyone, but sometimes it's just unfair for the other participants. So as difficult as it may be, we stay calm, we stay focused, we refer back to the rules that we've agreed upon, and this connects to what you've been discussing in the chat. It's very important to have these rules from the beginning, because they set the framework of the meeting, and then just you set limits. If they become very disrespectful, you don't have to put up with it, so you just stop it, you ask them to leave, or well, you take it from there, you pause it and you take it from there. But a lot of times it's not so so bad, it's not so serious, it's just people poking, no, and sometimes even thinking they are funny. But then again, we've been mentioning this a lot. Don't take it alone. It's not your fight. You use the group, because the group has a lot of power and they can pressure much more than you can, because it's their space, it's their role, it's their process. So just direct this to the support of the group, and make everyone responsible for what's going on in the dynamic. And then we have another common participant.
This participant is the kind of participant that enters the room in the morning when you start the activities or the meeting and is already upset, or is already bothered by something, or is already unhappy regarding how the agenda was structured. And basically you have to answer many objections. What comes from the complaining cat are many objections regarding how you structure the activities, how you are thinking of doing things, how you led this activity, how you structured such a sentence. What comes naturally, because we are human beings, and even by being facilitators, is to ignore them, or to sort of don't really look at them, or the other opposite, to confront them. And to confront them by explaining generally why we are right and why we are doing what we are doing. Sorina, please, could you, fantastic, click on the presentation. When this happens, is because we are taking it personally. So we are taking these comments on ourselves, and we are allowing these comments to actually make ourselves doubt the process that we are planned or the activities that we are doing. Please, every opportunity to have a moment of self-reflection is important and should be taken. But in this case, don't take it personally. If you realize such an attitude is coming from one of the participants, just stay calm and use the ability that you have of reformulating in a constructive way what is shared. If a participant tells you, or a complaining cat tells you, I've been doing this job for the past 20 years, and you know what? Doesn't make any sense to engage in a confrontation. It would be much better to use the information that is shared and give it to the group as a resource by restating it maybe as, because this person has a very long experience, is the ability that you have of smoothing the conflict, lowering the tension, lowering the desire of conflict, and use the content that's been expressed as a source to the group. If the issue goes beyond the level of, let's say, manageable, during the session, you might want to maybe discuss it during the break. But always remember that the group is your best source. The group of people that you facilitate are there, and they are part of the process, and they are responsible of the process as much as you are. And by that doing is not a fight you against the world. Actually, there is no fight. It's a common process, it's a common journey in which the facilitator simply kind of checks the path in order to make it easier for everybody to walk it. And though the walk is shared, is a common experience, so allow the group to support you. Always give back to the groups the same questions, so that you might also hear different voices and positive opinions, so they kind of balance. Okay, so this would be it from our side.
Thank you, Serena and Federica. There are a few questions that I've collated in the chat that perhaps are not yet responded completely. So I will ask them, and then you can choose how to answer them. In the meantime, I will invite our colleagues, our participants in this webinar, that if they feel that some of the questions, they have more questions, or some of their questions, for example, on difficult participants were not answered, to please just rewrite them in the chat so we can pick them up. But in the meantime, we had 3 questions. The first one is, how do you facilitate the design of participative projects? And this came from Sebastian in the frame of organizing meetings that are coordination meetings amongst different agencies. So how do you facilitate the design of participatory projects? A second one, it's about dealing with people that perhaps are not fluent speakers of the language that the training or the meeting is in, and how do you deal with people who are not fluent? And the third question is how do the facilitators decide which games activities to use in a specific environment? So feel free to take any of this, and I'll let it to you.
Okay, so we can go in order because so we I think it's clearer. The first one was regarding how do you facilitate participatory meeting. There are many dynamics that can be found also by online, and they regard how to structure a meeting in a way that you touch different points and you allow people to share their opinion and build together a path. Generally, they regard also the consensus. So they allowed you by some structural steps to build a path for the people to share their experience and their knowledge, as well as gathering a basis for an agreement. We can share some activities if you want, but if you would like a specific design, how to prepare a design, generally the idea is that the first moment is the moment in which you allow people to share their backgrounds and their needs as representative of a specific agency. So what are their needs and what are their objectives? And then those are shared and there are identified objectives and needs that for the all group working group are the most important ones. And from there on, you make people work in groups on different aspects that then will join back together in a common decision. This is generally the sort of path that is applied commonly. Though if you would prefer to have very specific information regarding this, I would kindly ask you to write to Marzia. What kind of design are you looking for, and what kind of activities you would like to use, and we can absolutely come back to you with suggestions or tools or handbooks that you could use to create and design such a meeting, facilitation meeting. Yeah.
Should I take the next one, Federica?
Sure.
Yeah. So what to do when you have a group of non-fluent speakers in a language? I would say it depends. If all the group is not familiar with the language or is not fluent, the interpreter might be a good idea, and then you should take into consideration the time needed for the translations and so on. Then if you have people with different language level in the same group, you could have a kind of a support system between themselves and help people that are more fluent and more proficient in the language, the people that don't, well, making sure there is still a language they can communicate in. I would say do not speak as we have spoken in this webinar, which means fast and a lot. Adapt your own way of working to this. Use as much visual tools as possible. Use drawings and schemes and graphic facilitation and all these kind of tools that involve nonverbal insights and methods. And probably you will need to slow down your activities. So revise the objective, make sure they are realistic, and choose your activities in such a way to take into consideration all the clarifications that need to be made. There are a lot of times people that are not fluent in a language that is the language of the meeting, and they are afraid to say it or they are shy to say it. So this is also again on us to create the space where mistakes are possible, where we are confident to show our weaknesses as participants, as much as our strengths. So make sure to check if people understand what is being said, and that they also feel, because sometimes they do understand, but they don't feel confident enough to answer or to talk. So encourage, again, maybe small groups, or somebody to help them with the translation. Maybe you speak one of the languages that they master better, so you can tell them, look, I speak this language, you can say this and I help you with the translation. I don't know, Federica, if you have other suggestions regarding this. John has a suggestion right now. Start with a discussion about languages spoken and used in the group. A ground rule guideline in the learning contract can be that any language can be used and translated if needed.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion also. And the last thing that I would put on the table is, remember that we speak a lot through words, but there are other ways of communicating. So we can reinforce activities that might require less debate, but might use other tools, other kind of communication, in order to allow everybody to anyhow feel comfortable, especially when relating to the peers, and gather information in a way that might be less difficult for the participants. And then last questions that we had was about how do you choose the activities and games and dynamics that you want to use with the participants. And we choose it exactly with the one of the sacred rules that we saw before, which is by the learning objectives. When you build a flow of a meeting, or you build a flow of educational workshops, always keep in account that the most important things for you is to reach the objectives. So when you choose activities and dynamics and games, you do so by building up in a process that goes growing, not like is like piling up. So you first try to create a safe space, then you try to make people explore the different topics, then you try to give them the opportunity to share, and then to reach the goal. So always check the activities depending on the learning objective first thing, and always try to keep in mind that people learn in different ways, or approach debates in different ways, which means take account that there are different kind of intelligences, and try to always change methods as much as possible in order not to tire people, and also to allow everybody to have the chance to experiment different kind of learning. So you may use presentation, and then role plays, and then debates, fishbowls, work cafe, whatever techniques you want, in order to have a good exchange, always taking into account the energy of people, and taking into account, for example, very logistical things. After lunch, people are sleepy. Don't make them do very long self-reflections. Don't make them write long or work along on their own, because their energy level will go very low. Maybe use this kind of activity in another moment of the day in which the energy is higher. I don't know, this would be my true sense on it. Sorina?
Yeah, I would say to maybe not to get fascinated by the method, to resist the call of the method. Sometimes we sacrifice the objective to the method because we think the method is really cool. So I would reinforce what you were saying, to keep in mind where we want to get, and then maybe to use all the factors that we have listed here in the slide on what to keep in mind when you facilitate. Those are also, I would say, the main criteria when choosing a method. So that is the objective, the group of participants, logistics, and yourself.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I think there are no more questions. A lot of feedback on thank you. And this is what I would like to share. I would like to thank our two resource people who have been brilliant, Sorina and Federica, that have guided us through this facilitation journey. But also I would like to really thank all the participants in the chat. You've been incredibly active. I really enjoyed it, I have to say. Thank you to John as well for facilitating the chat, and to all contributing so much in terms of our discussion on facilitation. Federica, Sorina, any last words before we close?
I would say thank you very much. To make the self-disclosure, it's been my first webinar and I have enjoyed it.
Excellent.
From my side also, I would like to thank you very much. And I very much enjoyed the experience. It's been much more active and interactive than I expected. So I'm very happy. Thank you for being with us in this way and so present and so engaged. And last suggestion is enjoy the content that you have with people when facilitating, because being a facilitator is one of the few jobs in which you learn so much as you actually spend time with the people. So it's incredible. It's a process of learning that we can enjoy constantly, and it's something that we should be aware of.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for the next webinar of the online learning series. That's all for now. Have a good rest of the day, evening. Bye.